I'm presenting an industry update, and thanks, John, and there'll be a few other speakers that follow me afterwards. What I will do is, if the people have got questions or comments or thoughts, due to time constraints, if you could sort of let me know, and I'd be more than delighted to sort of go through a bit more detail with you. So what I'm going to touch on is MMDs, because that's actually a big activity for this industry, especially with a lot of the regulation changes that are pending, and some of the activities that we're doing with Wollongong University on that. Obviously under the NDIS there's quite a bit happening, especially with the Quality and Safeguards Commission. Also there is a lot of legal requirements that are starting to unfold that people are starting to find out the hard way, but I just wanted to sort of help remind people of that. And also I'll be just touching on some of the activities of the TGA. But first of all, this is a Australia First chart. As you probably are aware, that we were commenced on a project to identify what is sold in AT. There was no there's no national sales data. We've been running a project to identify as a pilot with scooters, and we now actually have a national sales figures for scooters in Australia. So that's what this chart is showing, the sort of the numbers of scooters that are actually sold across Australia. The contribution of this information is not 100% of industry, because there were some sellers that elected not to be a part of the pilot. But I think once they get a sense of safety that this is not intended as a negative scenario, this is actually going to help the industry. So this will sort of move forward. The board has given the green light to move on to motorised wheelchairs. So we'll be setting together a project for 2020 to actually also capture motorised wheelchairs to get an idea of the market size and things of that nature. So as we get a bit more information and how it unfolds, we'll move it out into other segments. For those who've heard me before, I apologise in advance, but those who haven't, I think it's better just to have a quick understanding. You have Ausroads and you have the NTC. Ausroads is a grouping of all the state governments as a working group to deal with legislative activities to do with roads, where the National Transport Commission is the federal government's entity to identify common national road rules and road regulations. Both groups are looking independently at the MMD issue because of the speeds and weights and how they should be regulated. So both groups has been, for myself personally, it's like listening in stereo going to the two different groups, but it's a necessary activity in the landscape of the Australian context. Thankfully, Ausroads initially were heading down a path of using the new tech spec as the guideline. They've appeared to have moved away from that, which was brilliant. They look like they're going to go down a consumer-directed model. ATSA put forward to potentially use that tech spec and more down as a star rating approach, as opposed to a hard technical specification. That information's been fed back to the NTC. They're looking at sort of how do they tackle that as well. What you've got to remember that they're dealing with powered scooters, powered e-bikes, skateboards, as well as MMDs, and they're trying to work out what is the most appropriate method of dealing with that. I'm encouraging the industry to look at this very, very carefully, because there are now 2 papers out through the NTC. One is for the MMDs and one is for, if you like, electric transport. I think that's the best way I can describe it, the Lime bikes and things of that, no, Lime scooters I should say, things like that. But what we've got to remember as an industry, the clip-on power assist devices for manual chairs are not picked up in either of these papers. It's more of an unintended oversight. I went through and made comment of it, and I'll be truthful, I twigged, not until I saw the papers out, that those actually weren't picked up on. So one view thought is the minute you clip on a power assist device on a manual chair, it automatically turns into a motorised wheelchair, which is not necessarily appropriate. It could be for the push devices that clip on the back, because most of those will only go up to 6 kilometres an hour anyway. But the ones with the clip-on front power pull device, as I'm going to call it, that potentially should be argued as an e-bike, because it means that they can be on the footpath or on a scooter or cycleway, and it also has a difference on speed, It also has a difference of requirements. So if you had it as more of an e-bike concept, then you can travel at the same speed as an e-bike, but you'd have to wear a helmet. So you're treating it as more of a recreational device rather than a necessity device. I'm putting this out here for the industry to consider, but now's the time to raise it, because once the rules are set, it's going to be very hard to peel back. So if you've got any questions or thoughts, please let me know, because ATSA are in the process of putting together a submission on those lines to those 2 points. Also, with the joint research with the University of Wollongong, this is all to do with how people get around in motorised mobility devices. So we're looking for user groups. The irony of it is both Ausroads and the NTC have signed up to be part of the project, which is brilliant. So the idea is actually to get data. So those businesses who really want to be a part of it, you'll get fresh data, new research. It will help with the identifying what the right products are, what sort of designs may be necessary, what sort of opportunities may come about. So I think this will actually help the industry in a big way. But I think the greater thing is, at least we'll have some research that when we're setting road rules, we've got something to set it to. At the moment, the roads rules have been set to based on a person's intent rather than necessarily data or information. Technical spec is more to do with a tram track passage. That's really the essence of the technical spec. And in regards to white label and blue label, that's also a potential. I think that's actually softening on how that's going to be applied, but just to be aware that that's still a potential. So this is what I was mentioning before. You remember, it just does not address the need for fold-ups particularly well, and the power assist and the power aid devices. So just keep that in mind. And it's now's the time to speak, because if you don't, it won't happen. So with the university, it's called Move Together. It's a new website. It actually hangs off the back of ATSA's website. It's been done for a lot of practical reasons. But if you click onto that site, these slides will be made available. Click onto that site, you'll actually see what's going on, who's involved with the research. It's an international research group, so it's not just Wollongong University. So it's actually quite a coup, I believe. And these are the areas that they're very much working on. It's to really look at the whole power mobility from the perspective of the device users, and that's really where the key lay. Moving on now to the NDIS, NDIA. Okay, I've mentioned in my address at the AGM, but I'll just touch on it again for those who weren't part of that on the streaming. The Quality and Safeguards Commission, 1st of January, there will be rule changes. Anyone who's involved with auditing or needs to have an audit, make sure you have your extension beyond the 1st of January. The changes will not remove the need to have your processes and procedures. That does not go away. The difference is how they are managed and verified. So just, if you've got any concerns about that, let me know. I've got the information that you need to know. But it won't remove that, it's just the way you're audited and monitored. The NDIA are now doing a whole heap of data sharing, and that data sharing is actually, most of it's out now on employment, but that will actually start moving across a number of other areas and expectations of what the NDIS was intended for, and it's been done as a measurement and a judgment of where the success and otherwise is. With that in mind, the regulations, so the NDIA no longer are a regulator, they're a funder. So they've changed that process. So this is important to know now, because anyone who's funded through the NDIS, they're actually under fair trading, they're a consumer. So make sure when you look at your rules and regs within your organisation, you need to have a good education on dealing with consumer activity. You're no longer protected by government contracts. You're a business selling to a consumer. Change and big shift. So the ACCC are being very much involved, the TGA is very much involved, and also there is a number of other building authorities, mainly to do with home mods. So there's all these elements is now starting to come into play, and just to keep that in mind. Now, in regards to the funders, and I'll leave that to John to comment about MAS, but I'll let you know, Enable have formally stated as of the 24th of December, they will no longer support persons using NDIS funding. So if their wheelchair breaks down on Christmas Eve, and they haven't made their arrangements with their support structure, as horrible as this sounds, they're on their own. So it's a great business opportunity, I'll be upfront. Let your customers know you're there. Get that support plan in play, because the Enable New South Wales will only direct those to the suppliers. So on their website, they're all setting that up. We've worked with them a bit to try and assist them here, but to direct people to where they bought their device from. The repairs and maintenance, there's a lot of focus on that in the plans. I know that the NDIA haven't got it right. They'll tell you they haven't got it right, and they're actually working on it to get it right. But where a lot of the problem is the timing of the plan for the person. So when was it last reviewed? Did it have the repairs and maintenance when it was originally put together? So they're looking at ways of dealing with the emergency scenarios for when there isn't sufficient funds, but bearing in mind this is an opportunity to educate your clients and to get those things in play, ready to go. The last point that I want to bring up is that I've raised this before, but it's now starting to come more and more apparent. The NDIA are going to start moving more to an accountability model. And what I want to do is stress that the NDIA has no interest in cutting people off. I'll put that on the table straight away. But what they're going to start doing is they're going to look at, with their plan, why did they ask for this widget and that widget? Are they actually getting a benefit back to the person's goals and objectives? So that accountability aspect is going to become more and a stronger focus. The reasons why I'm raising that with the industry, at this stage of the game, we're not in the view, but what we could be in the view is if people start overselling, over-offering or overstating what a particular device or widget can do for them. So bearing in mind that accountability aspect will start to come into play, because the whole point of the NDIS is to equip people to the future. Which brings me back to the legal obligations. Remember the consumer rights, misleading, deceptive conduct will result in legal action. I know that there's a few people who are under the spotlight at the moment on that. Thankfully not our members, but they do work in our space. Remember your fit for purpose statements. You are dealing with vulnerable persons. You need to be very careful to make sure that your fit for purpose and your paperwork, it can be attributed that person has not been misled on any front. It's a double check of crossing I's and crossing your T's and dotting your I's. But just keep that in mind. And full disclosure of your interests is actually also very, very important. There's a couple of attendant care businesses that are in trouble for not fully disclosing their connections. They've been selling some AT on the side and they haven't let on the fact that they're actually taking a 50 and 100% cut. They're under investigation. So be open with your disclosure of interest, because that's a very big deal that's starting to come through. Remember your contracted supply. It's a consumer contract environment, and your state fair trading will be nice and active, especially now the full rollout is taken place. I know that I've already helped a few of our members deal with fair trading, because actually if what they told me was 100% true, there is a problem with the customer. Don't be afraid to ask fair trading to get involved at the earlier stages. They are actually not your enemy. They can actually help you resolve matters. I've had this experience in a number of other industries. Fair trading is not the bad guy. They actually can bring together a positive conclusion very quickly for you. So look at your arrangements that you have in place and just double check things. If you've got any questions, obviously let me know. GST. GST is a very awkward one in this area. You'll notice that on ATSA's website, we now actually have a GST information sheet on actually how to manage the GST for persons with the NDIS. You actually have to have a little contract with the person that they're declaring that they're an NDIS participant, and therefore you can end up getting some good GST exemptions. Look at it in detail, look at your circumstances. I am not going to give you tax advice. I'm not qualified to do so, nor do I intend to do so. But there's frameworks to look at, so talk to your accountant, make sure that you've understood them correctly. We've done our best to try and educate our membership on that. So look at the website, there's more details there for you. I know the TGA in Class 1 is not relevant to all our members, but obviously those who import, sell and manufacture, TGA is actually quite a big issue. They're going through a major review on Class 1s and what will be a Class 1 and will not be a Class 1. Basically what they're doing is they're focusing on getting rid of things that shouldn't be, like bedside tables in hospitals, bedside lamps in hospitals. They're all being registered as a medical device because that's where the state tender or the tender of that hospital has said it has to be a medical registered product to be able to be submitted. All of that's going to change, so they're actually trying to remove a large chunk of medical devices or exempt them. So it depends on where that lands, means that cutlery potentially could come off the TGA listings, but anything that's load-bearing or weight-bearing may or should, in my opinion, stay. So just to keep an eye on that, because it's really going to affect you on your registration and how you manage your registration.